The explosion wasn't loud, just sharp enough to snap me out of my chair. By the time I made it outside, my old farm rig was already drowning in flames, sparks firing into the night like angry fireflies. The hose was dead, the pump shut off, every escape cut with precision. Then I saw her. Marla Vance standing beside her silver Range Rover, calmly filming the fire with a smile colder than the smoke. She didn't run, she didn't hide, she wanted me to see her. What she didn't know was that she wasn't the only one recording tonight. I met Marla Vance 3 weeks before the fire, though calling it a meeting makes it sound friendlier than it was. I was fixing the hinge on my front gate when her silver Range Rover rolled up, stopping so close the dust hadn't even settled before she stepped out. Bright coral blazer clipboard hugged to her chest, sunglasses that reflected more judgment than sunlight. She looked less like a neighbor and more like a self-appointed governor of the county. "Good afternoon, Mr. Harrington," she said, voice sugar sweet but stiff around the edges. "I'm president of the Cedar Ridge Estates, HOA. We'd love to welcome you into our community." I wiped my hands on my jeans. "Ma'am, this isn't your community. This is county land." Her smile twitched just a hairline crack, but enough for me to see the steel underneath. "Boundaries evolve," she said, "especially when a neighborhood is improving." What she meant was simple. She didn't like land she couldn't control. She glanced past me toward my barn, noting every detail, like she was already drafting a violation in her mind. Then came the first micro-threat. "Most residents choose cooperation, Mr. Harrington. It prevents unnecessary conflict." I'd spent decades reading people for a living, and everything about her, the stance, the tone, the false warmth, told me one thing: Marla wasn't asking to include me. She was announcing her intention to conquer me, and that was the day the real fire started. I'd lived on that stretch of land long before Cedar Ridge Estates ever showed up on a developer's blueprint. My father bought the first 10 acres when he was 19, back when the road was still gravel, and the closest neighbor was a mile away. I grew up here mornings feeding chickens, afternoons learning how to patch fences, evenings listening to my father's stories about storms that nearly took the barn. After 25 years wearing a badge, most of them as county sheriff, I came back to the land the same way a man returns to a steady heartbeat. I didn't want noise committees, bylaws, or people with clipboards telling me how tall my grass should be. I wanted the predictable rhythm of honest work: fix the irrigation line, grease the gate bolts, check the water pump, swing by town for coffee at Della's Diner, chat with old farmers about weather and tractors. Life out here was simple, but simple isn't the same as easy. It just made sense. And for a while, Cedar Ridge left me alone. Their luxury homes stopped a few hundred yards short of my fence line, and I stayed out of their HOA politics. I figured they wanted manicured lawns and matching mailboxes. Fine. I wanted quiet. But peace usually ends in small ways. The first crack was a note folded unsealed, pushed into my mailbox. "Participation ensures community harmony." I tossed it. Then came the drone, small white humming over my barn roof, like a mechanical mosquito, dipping low enough to record my tool racks and water tanks. I waved a flashlight at it until it backed off toward the HOA subdivision. Still, I told myself it was just overzealous neighbors trying to catalog the area. I'd seen worse behavior from homeowner boards. They start with smiles, then guidelines, then mandatory suggestions, until one day you wake up and someone is measuring your fence because it affects property values. But the moment Marla Vance stepped onto my property with that practiced smile and that little clipboard hug, I knew Cedar Ridge wasn't just organized, they were ambitious. They weren't expanding community, they were expanding territory. And the only thing standing between them and a cleaner map was the one property they didn't own: mine. That was when I felt the shift, the air tightening, the quiet turning watchful, the kind of calm you feel right before a bad storm sits down on the horizon and refuses to move. And sure enough, the storm came knocking. The trouble didn't hit like a hammer. It slithered in quietly the way most bad things begin. 3 days after my conversation with Marla, a folded note appeared in my mailbox. No envelope, no signature, just the message: cooperation keeps communities safe. I tossed it out, but more came. Different handwriting, same tone, like someone trying on new masks, seeing which threat fit best. Then came the drone again, hovering lower, this time drifting over my barn roof, as if inspecting inventory. I aimed a flashlight at it, and it zipped away towards Cedar Ridge like a guilty dog. Next, someone spray-painted unsightly property ahead across my front gate in bright, sloppy red. The paint was fresh enough that it smeared when I touched it. I could feel something shifting in the air around my land, not danger yet, but irritation with sharp teeth. The kind of pressure meant to push a man into compliance. But if Marla thought mild harassment would crack me, she hadn't done her homework. I'd survived worse than HOA scare tactics, and I had more patience than she did. One morning while checking the fence line, I noticed colors that didn't belong. Thin wooden stakes, painted emerald green, hammered into the soil just inside my property. Each had a sticker reading Cedar Ridge Estates Proposed Community Border, proposed by who? Certainly not by the county. I yanked one out of the dirt. The bottom was still damp, freshly planted. As if summoned by the disturbance, Marla's silver Range Rover rolled up moments later. She stepped out, smiling like she was hosting a garden tour. "Oh, good you found them," she chirped. "We're planning to beautify the area. The expansion makes everything uniform." "Uniform?" I repeated. "This is my land." She folded her hands. "For now, but progress requires flexibility. You'll adjust." It wasn't a suggestion. It was an announcement. That night, her SUV cruised by 3 separate times, slowing enough to illuminate my barn doors and water pump with her headlights. Not long enough to trespass, just long enough to make a point. She wasn't pressuring me anymore. She was testing how far she could walk into my life before I snapped. She hadn't yet learned that I don't snap. I document. The night my farm rig burned, everything clicked into place, and everything burned with it. I'd been reading in the living room when a soft pop echoed outside. At first I thought it was the wind slamming something loose. But then, the glow stretched across my window and painted the walls orange. When I ran out, flames were already crawling up the rig's engine block, licking at the tires like they were soaked in accelerant. I sprinted to the spigot, twisted the valve, nothing. My stomach dropped. I rushed to the pump house. Someone had turned the valve off entirely. That wasn't an accident. That was sabotage. As the fire climbed, consuming 20 years of repairs and memories, I searched the darkness for movement. And there she was, Marla, leaning casually against her silver Range Rover, phone raised, recording the inferno like she was filming promotional footage for her ego. When our eyes met through the smoke, she smiled. A small, satisfied smile. By the time the fire crew arrived, the rig was nothing but a scorched skeleton. The captain sniffed the air and muttered, "Smells like gasoline." I nodded but said nothing. Instead, I went inside, opened the drawer by the kitchen table, and took out my sheriff's badge. I hadn't worn it in months. But the fire made one thing clear. Retirement was over. The next morning I returned to the scene, not as a landowner but as an investigator. Evidence first: footprints. In the loose dirt, narrow, likely women's boots or heels. A warped plastic fragment near the fence, part of a fuel container. Camera footage showing Marla's Range Rover creeping past at 1:143 p.m., minutes before the flames. I stored each file in a digital folder labeled CR Estate Incident 01. Then I headed to Marlowe's Hardware, where old man Marlowe had known me since my rookie days. When I asked if anyone had bought fuel containers recently, he scratched his chin. "Lady in a coral blazer," he said. "Drove a fancy silver SUV. Bought 2 cans. Said it was for yard work." Yard work. Right. Next I called Nate Briggs, my old deputy. Nate pulled records on Marla Vance, prior disputes, HOA, complaints, anything weird. He didn't ask why. He heard the old sheriff in my voice. Hours later, Nate called back. "You're gonna like this," he said. "She's been removed from 2 previous HOAs for intimidation. Patterns always matter." And hers was starting to look like a confession written in history. By then I'd set up new motion-triggered cameras around the fence line, concealed silent watching. At 2:12 a.m., 2 nights later, my phone buzzed with an alert. When I opened the feed, my stomach tightened. 2 figures in dark hoodies slipped along the ditch, one tall, one short. The shorter one pushed back her hood, revealing unmistakable blonde hair. Marla. They crouched by the boundary and whispered. The tall man pulled out a hammer. She held a bag of newly painted stakes identical to the ones I'd found earlier. Together they wedged them deeper into my soil, not just symbolic this time, but deliberate boundary theft. Then the hammering stopped. The man lifted a metal canister and poured a thin trail near the burned rig's remains. Accelerant. Again. I didn't move. Didn't shout. Didn't reach for the door. I let the cameras drink in every detail. When they slipped back through the fence and into the night, I finally exhaled. Slowly. Purposefully. By sunrise, I had a plan, quiet, legal, airtight. I drafted an official-looking notice from a county environmental unit announcing a mandatory inspection and cleanup review scheduled for Saturday morning. And knowing Marla's addiction to attention, I knew exactly what she'd do. She'd show up. She'd trespass again. She'd bring witnesses. And this time the law would be waiting. Saturday morning came crisp and sharp, the kind of air that carries sound farther than usual. I stood by my barn, wearing a plain jacket, collar, turned up, badge clipped just inside but not hidden. The land around me looked perfectly staged. The burned rig, the broken fence post, the patch of dirt where Marla had hammered her fake boundary. Right at 9:14 a.m., the convoy arrived. 3 luxury SUVs, 2 sedans, all spotless, all displaying the Cedar Ridge Estates window decal. They rolled to a stop like a parade of entitlement. Marla stepped out first. Coral blazer, clipboard, glasses that reflected everything except accountability. Behind her came 2 board members, Tom, who always looked nervous, and Linda, who filmed everything for the HOA's social media. "All right, everyone," Marla called out, loud enough for the cameras. "Let's begin restoring this hazardous eyesore." She pointed straight at my burned rig. "This will be the first area reclaimed for our Greenway extension." 2 hired workers hesitated. "Ma'am, this looks like his land." Marla didn't even blink. Not for long. That was the moment I tapped the mic clip to my collar. "Units move in." From behind my tree line, 2 sheriff trucks rolled out slowly, tires crunching gravel like punctuation. Marla turned and froze. Deputy Nate Briggs stepped forward, uniform, immaculate expression, unreadable, but he didn't say a word. He didn't have to. I walked out from the shadow of the barn, pulling my jacket aside just enough for the badge to catch the sunlight. Marla's mouth fell open. You're law enforcement sheriff?" I corrected calmly. "Of this entire county." Her clipboard slipped an inch. "Marla Vance," I announced, shifting to the voice I'd used in hundreds of arrests. "You are trespassing on county property, attempting unauthorized boundary alteration, and obstructing a criminal investigation." "That's ridiculous," she barked. "This is community improvement. Let's check the tape." Nate held up his phone screen, mirroring to the squad car monitor. The first video played, her Range Rover creeping past my property at 1:14 p.m., 15 minutes before the fire. Headlights pausing right beside the rig. Next clip, Marla standing across the road filming the flames. The audio caught her whisper, "Maybe now he'll listen." The workers stepped back. Even Tom flinched. Then the final footage rolled. Marla and another man sneaking onto my land at 212A, hammering stakes labeled Cedar Ridge Estates, pouring accelerant near the rig's remains. Gasps broke out. Linda's camera trembled in her hands. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. "Marla, that's arson. Documented arson." Her face drained of color. "This is a setup," Marla snapped, but her voice cracked. "You baited me. This is entrapment." I stepped closer, careful, steady. "You walked willingly onto my land. You filmed yourself at the scene of the fire. You bought the fuel cans. You planted fake boundary markers. You escalated. Not me." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "You think that badge makes you untouchable?" "No," I said. "It makes the law unavoidable." Nate moved behind her, cuffs ready. "Ma'am, turn around." "Don't you dare," she hissed, backing up, but there was nowhere to go. My burned rig sat behind her like a witness. My fence blocked her path, and her entire board watched, horrified, realizing they'd tied themselves to a sinking ship. Tom whispered, "I told you this would backfire." "Shut up," she barked, her final command as HOA president. Nate gently took her wrist. "Hands behind your back, Miss Vance." The metallic click of the cuffs echoed across the property like a closing chapter, sharp and final. Marla didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared at me with that cold, simmering hatred reserved for people who think they'll never be held accountable. "You haven't won," she muttered, as Nate guided her to the cruiser. "People like me always come back." "Maybe," I said, "but not here, and not over my line." The door shut, the cruiser rolled away, and for the first time in months, the air over my land felt lighter. By noon, the cruisers were gone, leaving my land strangely quiet. No HOA patrols, no SUVs circling like vultures. Just the burned outline of my rig and the soft hum of the field settling back into themselves. I walked the fence line slowly, letting the silence soak in. For the first time in weeks, it didn't feel like surveillance. It felt like breathing again. Late that afternoon, 3 neighbors pulled up in 2 dusty pickups. No HOA badges, no clipboards. Just work gloves and the awkward look of people finally waking up. The oldest, Mr. Bowden, cleared his throat. "Sheriff, we'd like to help fix the fence. Figured it's time we stopped pretending we didn't see things." They weren't apologizing for Marla. They were apologizing for their silence. And honestly, that was enough. "Grab a hammer," I said. We worked for hours, crooked nails, mismatched boards, but honest effort. Kids rode their bikes past my driveway. A couple waved as they walked their dog, no longer afraid of being seen interacting with the sheriff. It felt like the community was thawing. As the sun dipped, Mr. Bowden leaned on the fence. "She had us convinced you were the problem," he admitted. Fear does that, I said. But it doesn't last when truth shows up. That night, the land felt lighter. So did I. 3 days later, the county courthouse overflowed. Reporters, residents, curious onlookers, they all came to see what became of Cedar Ridge's self-appointed queen. The district attorney stepped to the mic. After reviewing evidence, she announced the county is filing charges of arson, trespassing, destruction of property, falsification of documents, and misuse of HOA funds against Miss Marla Vance. A wave of murmurs rolled through the room. People who once clapped at Marla's HOA speeches now stared at the floor. During the trial, I testified briefly, just the facts, timestamps, camera angles, inconsistencies in Marla's story. The rest spoke for itself. The footage of her filming my burning rig, the accelerant found near my fence, the forged boundary markers, and the fake HOA expansion paperwork. Marla sat stiff in her jumpsuit, jaw tight, eyes hollow. Her attorney tried twisting it into community oversight gone wrong, but the audio clip, "Maybe now he'll listen," ended that argument. The jury returned quickly. Guilty on all counts. Cedar Ridge Estates HOA didn't survive either. The county stripped their charter, dissolved the board, and enacted a new oversight policy, the Vance Amendment, requiring external monitoring, verified boundaries, and strict limits on HOA enforcement. Her name finally made history, just not the version she envisioned. A week after the verdict, a plain envelope appeared in my mailbox. Inside was a photo of me outside the courthouse with a handwritten message: "Power always finds its way back." No signature, didn't need one. Marla still had followers, confused loyalists who believed domination and leadership were the same thing. I kept the letter, but didn't lose sleep. I dealt with scarier people than HOA disciples. 2 nights later, my cameras caught 2 figures sneaking through the fence, hoodies, gloves, one with a hammer, one with a fuel can. Deja vu, but sloppier. Nate and I intercepted them before they got 10 feet from the barn. One of them was Tom, the former HOA treasurer. His excuse: "Marla will fix everything when she gets out." Not anymore. They were arrested for attempted vandalism and intimidation. After that, the resistance fizzled. The spell was broken. Weeks later, something better grew in its place. A group of neighbors started Redstone Commons, a volunteer circle with no dues, no power trips, just locals patching ditches, cleaning trails, and bringing casseroles to sick families. They invited me to the first gathering. I brought lemonade and stayed longer than I expected. Life finally fell back into its rhythm. The new fence gleamed in the morning sun. Jerry's loaner tractor hummed through the fields. Neighbors waved without looking over their shoulders. One quiet morning, I carved a small wooden sign and nailed it to my fence: "Respect the line." Not a threat, a truth. Because this whole battle with Marla had never been about land. It was about boundaries, moral ones, and what happens when someone believes they're above them. Standing your ground isn't stubbornness, it's survival. And this land remembers who stood.